Hello, everyone. My name is Nuno. I'm Global Product Lead at eBay, and today I'll be talking about the power of design thinking in product management. So before we start, a bit of my background. I'm Portuguese, although I'm living in the Netherlands since 2015. I have a master in computer science and MBA. I have already 12 years experience as product manager, so delivering awesome products to the market. And I have education in design thinking from Columbia University. So when I thought about this webinar, I think the first thing that we need to start off is by defining what is product management. And of course, you can define product management the way that usually you can find it on many books over the internet, etc., which is product management is the intersection between user experience, technology, and business. You can also say, if you dive deeper a bit, that product management is building a product from A to Z and building that product, making the strategy, creating the backlog, the roadmap, all of that is part of the product management. But of course, if someone of my friends or family asks me, what do you do? I always have a hard time explaining them what I do using these definitions or existing definitions. So I like to explain what I do to my family and friends by telling them that I operate or work in 5 different dimensions. Those dimensions are learning. So product management is about learning about technologies, learning about business models, learning about customers, learning about customer needs and how they evolve over time. Job of the product manager to be constantly learning about all of those. The second one is about choosing. The product management or manager is ultimately responsible for choosing the right problem to solve. Regardless of the solution, selecting the right problem is the essence of what the product manager should be doing and what he should be accountable for. Why are we addressing this problem? Why does the problem even matter in the first place? What are you trying to solve? What data supports the decision to address the specific challenges? These are the questions that matter the most at the point and that the product manager should be able to answer. The third dimension is about linking the dots. So you always operate in a context. In your company, it's like a sea. You have many boats going to many different directions, right? And you are over there in the middle of that sea. So you need to understand how do you fit in that context, where your boat is going and how does that connect with the other boats that are in the sea as well. It's about fitting your strategy into the company strategy, which usually should be longer, let's say 3 to 5 years. So that's linking the dots. The fourth one is about engaging and inspiring. It's the ability to articulate your vision, your product vision, by synthesizing whatever data points you have and formulating an interpretation of those that feel inspiring and data-driven. This is a critical element of the whole product management art. But it's not only that, it's about creating an environment without silos, where you increase the empathy between teams and align incentives and objectives up to the more senior management level. By itself, this alone, it's a form of art. And one of the most fundamental things and one of the most important dimensions in product management. Lastly, we have adjusting and going from the ideation phase up to the point where a product is live on the market requires constant adjustment. Constant adjustments that are driven by specific KPIs, metrics, or even direct customer feedback, and that will impact both features, priorities, up to the benefit a particular product is expected to bring. The product manager should be able to interpret those data points, understand and quantify their impact on whatever is being done at the moment. So this would be the last dimension. So having this definition of product management or product manager, my definition, and the way that I usually talk about these to my family and friends, I think 3 questions arise. The first one is, so how do we make sure that we can tap into the right problem, that we are choosing the right problem to solve? The second question is, okay, and assuming that we choose the right problem, how do we go from problem space to solution space? How do we go to the solution? And lastly is, how do we make sure that we build something that is able to offset the operational risk of building something that the customer doesn't want? So one way that I would go about this is using design thinking. And what is design thinking, you ask? Okay, simply design thinking is a process for creative problem solving. That's the common and the basic definition of design thinking. But if you dive deeper, you understand that design thinking as a human-centered core. So it's very focused on the human needs, on the customer, and it essentially encourages organizations to focus on the people they are creating for, which leads to better products, better services, and internal processes. Basically, when you sit down to create a solution for the business needs, the first question should always be, what's the human need behind it? And of course, as you can see also in this graphic, when you employ design thinking, you are essentially pulling together what's on one hand desirable from a human point of view with what is technological feasible and economically viable. But for me, when I use design thinking in the whole product management process, design thinking is a process that allows me to tap into the right problems, amplify the creative problem solving potential while failing fast in iterating. So going a bit deeper on this, design thinking, as I like to say, is, yes, it's a collection of hands-on methods, but it is very important to keep in mind that design thinking is fundamentally a mindset, a way of thinking that is, on one hand, human-centered. So again, very focused on the customer. It's experimental by doing experiment, build the smallest experiment that you can run to learn more. And it's biased toward action. So it's about doing things rather than be lost in theory. So with that, we go to the 5 steps of design thinking. So design thinking is, or are essentially a set of 5 convergent and divergent steps. So bringing people together and allow them to think by themselves, and starts by empathizing. So essentially go talk with the customers and understand their needs, define the problem, what is actually the problem behind that need, ideate the solutions. So on top of those problems, what are the solutions? Be creative. What are the solutions that we can build its prototype, the simple and the smallest experiment that we can run for them to finally test and learn, taking those experiments and those prototypes to the customers and see if they resonate. And if they don't resonate, it's an iterative process where you go back and select another idea, or you can go back and even look for a different problem to look for. So these are the 5 steps of design thinking. And I'm going now to talk about in detail the 5 steps and how can you actually incorporate those into your daily work. However, I want to mention, and this is quite important, that although what I'm going to talk is a bit of a condensed version of design thinking, I think will help you already to incorporate that into your daily work, and you can start doing things with design thinking into your product management process, although the devil is in the details. And I think these details will only come after practices. So I would encourage you to read more after these about design thinking and try to experiment all these steps, and of course, do it. So be biased towards action, and try it out by yourself. You will be learning so much more about this as you gain from experience. So the first step, as we said, is empathize. And empathize is talking with the customers, understanding their needs. And here, what you don't want is to go to the customer and simply ask them, hey, what do you want? And simply download the content of that conversation, right? You don't want to be in a position where you will be asking the customers what's the product that they want and be like in solution mode. You rather want to be in the problem space and try to uncover what needs are behind the needs and what needs are behind the needs. Right? So just to give you a small example, Henry Ford once said that, this is quite funny, if I ask my customers what they wanted, they have said a faster horse, right? And that tells you a lot about how you should face these conversations with your customers. So they should be about asking why and why. Why do you have that need? Why do you have that problem? Why does that matter? Why? And try to uncover and unpeeling the onion is almost like an onion that you unpeel need after need after need. So one way that you can go about this is using this interview arc, where essentially you will starting by building rapport with the customer, and you seek for specific stories around the context that you are talking about, and then you ask why. Why do you feel that way? Why are you saying that? Why does that matter? And essentially in this part, what you will be doing is collecting all these raw data from the customer. The second step or stage is about defining. And here it's about what is the problem really about. The objective is to really understand what the problems you have uncovered are really about, and it's about generating problem needs as verbs. And of course, to find patterns across users. That's what you want. You want to find patterns across users of needs. Just make sure that you put those needs as verbs. So the first thing that you need to do in this step is to essentially digest the content of the interviews alone and try to go through the content and list all the needs that you have uncovered during the empathize phase. Write those problems and needs you have uncovered, and let me go to the next slide, and map them in the depth of need. So the depth of needs is actually quite relevant piece of information that you should be aware of. And these, how do I put this? So essentially needs can be more shallow needs, or it can be more deeper, more connected to the human being itself. And the way that you uncover those more deeper needs is, of course, by asking why and why repeatedly. Right? So it's almost like unpeeling an onion until you really find the deeper needs that the customer has. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So you might remember those gloves that appeared some years ago that will allow people to use their mobile phone with their gloves on. So they would be able to utilize their smartphone even with the gloves on. So when they when they interview the customers in order to understand what their needs were, they've identified a range in the full spectrum of the depth of needs, from really superficial or shallow needs around, yeah, I need to use my smartphone when it's cold and I'm having, and I want to utilize my smartphone when it's cold and I'm utilizing my gloves. So that's the reason why I want to use my smartphone in the first place. But asking and unpeeling the onion, you ask, but why do you need to use your smartphone when it's cold? And why do you want your smartphone at all? And why do you want to know about people? And you go down in unpeeling that onion till the point, and this was an actual example, till the point that they find out that they actually have the need to be connected with friends and family, and that was the deeper need that they were addressing. And of course, I want to make this point that when you go from this point to the next stages of design thinking, you will be selecting needs to work on, and there's no right or wrong answer by selecting more shallow needs or selecting more deep needs. So it's about how do you prioritize them and going through with the process till the end and see if that resonates with the customer, and if not, you go back, iterate, and select another need. So the third step, or the second step in this define part, is that you would aim to now reach shared agreement on what problems, needs you should solve for. And for this particular exercise, what I would recommend you is to look into something called liberating structures. Liberating structures are a selection of 33 structures that are curated for facilitating meetings and conversation. So if you look there for a structure called 1, 2, 4, all, you can essentially, what you can do is you can set each person to individually digest all the information gathered from the interviews, from the customers, and from this mapping of depth of need. And essentially, by absorbing this information, they would be listing these specific needs as verbs as they've ever covered. And let's say after 10, 20 minutes of each individual person, and that's the 1, 2, 4, all, you will be starting converging. So each person individually analyze the data, and then they will come together as pairs, and they will discuss with their pairs on what they found, and they will come to a shared agreement on which, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 problems or needs they want to address. And then depending on the size of the group you're working with, you would come as 4 people, or you would come as a group, and you would then decide, or collectively choose for, again, 2, 3, 4 problems, needs that you would like to tackle. But one thing that is important at this point is that you should put those problems or needs as problem statements. So a problem statement here would be, so an example of that would be, whomever is affected by that problem, the customer, and now as an example, imagine that they want their system to allow something, so something that they want their system to do because of, and the insight. So what kind of data help you draw that conclusion? So what kind of data points you have from the interviews that allows you to say that that customer want their system to be faster or more resilient or whatever. So the final step in the define part is to write. You would pick up those 3-4 problem statements and you would transform them into design principles. And design principles are based off needs, problems, and they actually define a direction to explore, not a solution. Very important to keep this in mind. It's a direction to explore, not a solution. So imagine that one of the needs or problems uncovered is about, let's say, a particular database in a given platform, which is quite slow. If you would have to rewrite it as a design principle, you would rewrite it as our platform database is so fast that there's almost no latency. So you actually rewrite it as the way that you want it to be. So this is the define part, and then you would go for ideation as the next step. But once we arrive here, and actually even before the real ideation kicks in, you should be transforming those design principles that you wrote into how might we's. And how might we statements, essentially, they are the basis. They prepare you to generate ideas that address the design principles. So it's essentially a pre-step to start the real ideation process. And here, the way you transform those design principles into how might we's, it's quite simple. So essentially, you should add how might we in the beginning of each sentence. So if we use the previous design principle example, we had our platform database is so fast that there's almost no latency. So the way that we would transform these into how might we would be, how might we make our platform database so fast that there's almost no latency? And you would get like 3 or 4 how might we's, and those would be the ones that you're going to address. So what we will do in the next step is actually having those how might we's in post-its and having everyone individually ideate. And here, what you really need to keep in mind is that you should give yourself all the options. Go wild, go for quantity. Just add ideas, and you would put ideas for each one of those how might we's, as many as you want, as many as you can. Just go for quantity. And after some time, when everybody has done this ideation process, that is, as I said, individual, then you can give a bit of time so everybody explains what their ideas are about, and maybe you can cluster them into similar ideas, right? So when you do this work, everybody should be at the same level of information, understanding that what kind of ideas are present and ready to be voted, which is essentially the last step. Here, each person has 3 votes, and yeah, they can vote in any form or way that they want. And at the end, it's quite simple. So you would be prioritizing those ideas according to the number of votes. So once you have that prioritization done, you would go for prototype. So remember what I said, that this is very biased towards action. Here is the point where you really should start thinking, what is the smallest experiment that I can build? So start building start building prototypes, which you have 2 types of prototypes. You have the tangible prototypes and you have intangible prototypes. So tangible prototypes is like, imagine that you thought about a website. You can build a low resolution, like in a paper, kind of UX. So you have your customers interacting with it, or you can have what it's called a Wizard of Oz, which is essentially a web page with nothing behind, but you have a field where you can enter your email, and you think that there's a lot going on in processing that email, and actually you are only collecting that email to see how the customer resonates with the idea. And you have intangible prototypes. So intangible prototypes, although they are about systems and experience, their main objective is to actually try to make them usable by real customers. So an example of those is a role play. You can try to mimic an experience or a system by using a role play. So just build something out of those ideas. Just try to build something that you can put in front of your customer. And there's a lot of things about prototypes. I suggest you to read a bit more about it. But the main idea here is go from the idea and go and test it with your customers. So the last step, as said, is about test. Once you have all your prototypes done, it's time to test. And again, the goal here is to elicit actionable feedback from the customers that you can inform you of the next iteration. So one way you can do this, you have multiple ways, of course, that you can collect that feedback. But one way you can do it, and a way that I like to do it, is using empathy maps. So you can read more about empathy maps, but essentially you have 4 quadrants and those quadrants are about what is observed and what is inferred. So what the customers say and what they do and what they think and what they feel. And you would go and capture that and try to understand how that customer resonate or not with those prototypes. So arrive to this part. What happens here is that you would have 2 options. Either the customer doesn't resonate with that prototype, with that experience, and you would go back and select different ideas to test. Go again, prototype, test, idea, prototype, test. Once you run out of ideas, maybe it's a good idea to go back in the process and select another problem to work on. So as you remember, you select 2 or 3 problem statements, but you had more, so you can go there and start looking for others. So as said, this is an iterative process that never ends when you find that the customer resonate with the experiment that you are doing. So this is essentially a condensed version of design thinking, what you can do with it in your product management process. I found it very powerful. And as final thoughts, I really think that design thinking, if done correctly, can help you choose the right problem to work on, bridge the problem and the solution space, so going from problem space to solution space. And because you are validating that problem right from the get-go, and you have like solid data points that the customer resonate with it, what happened is that when you will build it, you will be offsetting that risk of the customer doesn't, the customer would not wanted that product. So I think using design thinking, the product management lifecycle can truly amplify your creative problem solving potential. Do that with your peer product managers, but please make sure you also include the engineering teams, the UX teams, Q&A teams. I think that's where the power is, because if you are able to put one engineer in front of a customer, talking with the customer, the entire process of developing a product will be much smoother, because having the engineering team developing something and knowing that, oh, I know that what I'm developing was actually it comes from that interview I had with a customer where he told me that he had this problem or he had this need. So it kind of, smooths out the process. and be biased towards action. So it's about failing fast. It's about quick iterate, and go through the design thinking process. Just do it and test as many times as you can. Don't be lost in a lot of theory. Just go out, talk with customers, prototype, test it, and iterate from there. I hope you have enjoyed it. This was my webinar. Thank you very much, and goodbye.